Hello, I'm Jonathan Tilbrook, Head of Orchestral Studies here at Trinity Laban, and I've been asked to prepare a short session on the marking of contemporary scores. What I'm going to look at in this session is Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, not particularly contemporary, but the kind of things that I'm going to talk about will apply to music by Stravinsky and his contemporaries and to many other composers through the 20th century and into the 21st century. And the crucial point here really is how we mark scores that feature unequal meters, very much shifting rhythmic patterns, where we need to understand as performers very clearly how the bars are grouped, how the conductor might beat these particular bars, and how we understand the relationship of our rhythmic figuration to the rhythmic figuration of other instruments around us. As I said, we're going to use Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. I've got a couple of excerpts here, one the glorification of the chosen one, and the following section, the evocation of the ancestors, both of which feature some interesting examples of these kind of questions. So I'm going to start marking this copy of the first violin part that's in front of me. We're here at figure 104 after the notorious pounding 11 crotchets of the bar before. We then move into a section of almost constantly changing time signatures. So the first thing I'm going to do is just put a nice clear line down here. Stravinsky might helpfully actually have written a double bar, but he didn't. So I'm going to just clarify this beginning of this section, possibly circle the 5/8. But immediately we're faced with a situation with how is the 5/8 to be grouped? Is it 2 plus 3 or is it 3 plus 2? Either way, we're going to use a system of symbols called hats and triangles. If I just mark them over here to the side, a hat like this and a triangle like this. The hat will indicate a beat that has 2 quavers, or possibly, in another section we'll come to later, could equal 2 crotchets. But for the purposes of this section, a hat will equal a beat of 2 quavers, a triangle will equal a beat of 3 quavers, like so. So here at this first 5/8 bar, most conductors will actually conduct this as 3 plus 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with this pizzicato G falling on the second beat of the bar. So we can notate this in our part as triangle and then hat. And the following bar, the same. However, some conductors might prefer to conduct this the other way round. It's perfectly plausible to do it that way, in which case we'd need to write hat, and then the triangle would begin here. That's where the second beat of the bar would fall. Some composers in the 20th century and more contemporary composers add these symbols to their own music. There are lots of examples. I can think of pieces by Steve Reich, pieces by Copeland, various others, where the composers will already tell you, by using this system of notation, how they wish the bars to be grouped. But many composers, Stravinsky amongst them, left that to the performer's discretion. In many cases, it's actually very clear how the music is grouped because of the barring of the notes, or the rhythmic shape of a bar is very apparent. But there are many instances like this where actually you could go either way, and the performer and the conductor need to make those decisions, and we need to mark our parts accordingly. If we move on to the 9/8 bar, and this is another example, most conductors actually conduct this 9/8 bar in 4. Of course, a 9/8 bar we'd perhaps normally expect to be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But because of the nature of the rhythmic material here, many conductors choose to beat it in 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we might then mark hat, 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 triangle. But of course, if a particular conductor wants it in 3, we'll write in 3 and 3 triangles. And then similar things apply through these subsequent bars. There's the first 7/8, most commonly that will be triangle 3 plus 2 plus 2. But another very important feature that's particularly apparent here is that there are an awful lot of rests. And what is happening in the rests? In many examples in Stravinsky, he likes to have silent rests, where we need to see a very definite beat from the conductor against which we can play with confidence and accuracy. It happens in this particular excerpt that there are very definite things being played on these quaver beats, so I might, at least initially, pencil some of these in. In this case, I would write bass. Cello bass in the orchestra, bass brass instruments, percussion are playing very powerfully on these quaver rests, but it can often be extremely useful for us to know where our ears should go to hear the instruments playing on the beats, to give us again that confidence and good ensemble discipline of positioning our own notes. So again, many similar things apply through here. 106, we have a 4/8 bar, so that's 2 hats. And then an important change. After these sequence of bars that are in quavers, we now have 7/4, a bar in crotchets already. So important to circle that, just so that we know that the unit of pulse is what the unit of pulse is here. And also to be absolutely certain whether we are playing on the beat or after the beat. It happens that the beats fall here. So we are actually playing against the beat in these bars. Again, useful to know, and perhaps just to pencil somewhere underneath, that these quaver rests are not silent, far from it, and just to pencil quavers so that we know to listen for them in the lower instruments of the orchestra. 3/4 bar, straightforward, 7/4, same as above. This bar, 3/8 bar at figure 108, is an interesting one. First violins play this quaver, second quaver of the bar, but again, perhaps useful to know that the other 2 quavers in the bar are also played. So just rather than leaving it as a rest, which implies silence, to actually pencil a quaver so that we know to expect something audible in those apparently empty beats. And then the rest of this page is material similar to that we've seen before. So let's move on to the top of the next page. 6/8 bar, again, normally would expect to see this conducted 3 plus 3, and to think of it that way. Again, some conductors, because of the pounding da rhythmic nature of the material here, some conductors choose to conduct these 6/8 bars in 3. So again, you'd use either the triangles or the hats, depending. Following that, the same principles apply. I think the next thing, again, we're in a pattern of bars in quavers, but to clarify the next bar here, which is spelled as a 3/4 bar, not in itself particularly problematic, but again, the crucial thing of knowing where the beats fall, adding some extra lines so that you can see the beats fall on the empty quaver rests. And again, know that something is played on the empty quaver rests for you to react to. Similarly in the 4/4 bar here, put the lines down so you can see very clearly on the part where the beats fall for you to react to them. 5/4 here, relatively simple, offbeat pizzicato quavers, but again, you might just need to be absolutely clear in your mind. Here it's the trumpets, particularly, not only, but particularly trumpets that you will hear in the orchestra playing the on-beat quavers for you to react to. And similarly, in these 3/4 bars, very strong, clear on-beat quavers against which you play your triplet quaver figuration. And again, through the rest of this page, similar things will apply. Let's move on to the next. So this pattern continues, lots of offbeat playing. Again, you just need to possibly clarify how many beats there are in each bar as you keep this pattern moving. And again, you might just add the first couple of times so you know again that there are on-beat sounds for you to play against. And that continues through the rest of this section. Now at the bottom of this page, 5/4 bar, it says, that's a misprint. Well, a misprint. The commonly played version of Rite of Spring is the 1947 revision. This part happens to be a much earlier part from the 1920s. But in the 1947 revision, this is a 5/8 bar and molto allegando as well. So usually conducted in 5, and the horns, so our pencil horns, play on each of the beats through this bar. So again, useful to have an oral cue and to know, even in silence, that the allegando probably will dictate the conductor conducts in 5 beats. Good, moving on. Just again, as we have our tempo at the top of this page, silence in this first violin part, very useful to know that the second violins play triplet quavers in the first 2 beats. So I would pencil those in and say V2. So we again know absolutely clearly what we should be listening for to position our entry on the 3rd beat accurately. Good, and then we're in essentially to a return to what we had at the beginning of this excerpt, so I don't think I need to mark those things again. But I did want just to get on to this little change of meter, change of character. It's a new section, the evocation of the ancestors, here at figure 121. A critical thing when dealing with music like this is to know what is the underlying unit of pulse that we're working in. And here Stravinsky's changed the time signature to 3/2, 3 minims in a bar. So this will be conducted in 3, a 2/2 bar in 2, fine, okay. And at least here, helpfully, we have a cue. It says flute, but it's all the winds, plus winds. The flutes may well not be the most audible thing here. So again, always useful to check. But because we've now moved into the minim as our unit of pulse, it means that 3/4 bars and 2/4 bars at this pace are actually going to be conducted in 1. So the 3/4 will now have a triangle, and the 2/4 will now have a hat, and the 3/4 a triangle. And then when we go back to minims, here we're in 3 again. So the unit of pulse, understanding very, very clearly what is the underlying unit of pulse, again, will be critical to rhythmic accuracy and good ensemble. So again, triangles and hats for 3/4, 3/2, in 3. This section again, as with much of Stravinsky, there's a lot of rests to deal with. And again, knowing what to listen for, to know if there is sound in the rests that we need to hear and connect with, or whether the rests are silent, is a very important thing. And I just want to clarify, 123, yes, that looks like a silent bar, but there are in fact 2 crotchets sounding in this bar from the brass. So we need to know that, pencil that in. And also importantly here at 125, bassoons are playing in this 2/2 bar. Minim, crotchet, crotchet. BN for bassoon, or if you prefer to be more Germanic, FG for fagot. But adding some additional cues, particularly through these passages of silence, can again be very helpful to feeling entirely confident about where you play. And I think that covers everything I wanted to say about marking this particular excerpt from the Stravinsky. But I did just want to look at one other thing. At the bottom, I'll use this one, it'll be easier for you to see. Figure 12 here is a little conducting exercise that we use in the 4th year and postgraduate conducting classes. The reason I've just brought this along, to just briefly mention at the end, is that you will see here that the notation now has triangles with a triangle inside and a hat with a hat inside. This is a useful way of annotating a part where, as you'll see here, we're not just dealing with bars in 3/8 and 5/8, but also 3/16 and 5/16. So continuing to use the triangle hat notation can be very helpful, but this is a way of distinguishing the bars that are in semiquavers from those that are in quavers or crotchets. Not everybody likes that method. There are other ways of doing it. If you know that you're in a section of music where the basic unit of pulse is a quaver, you might not feel it's necessary to use all those triangles and hats and just reserve them for the 3/16 and 5/16 bars. But where things are shifting very quickly, again, it is a simple and very clear visual prompt that saves one having to digest all the numerals that one sees on the score. So I hope that's been useful. It's so important when one approaches this kind of repertoire with rhythmic complexity, with lots of rests and understanding what's happening in silence, that we have a part that is really helpfully marked up, just to give us greater confidence, greater certainty about what we're doing. Whenever you're preparing something like this, do go and get a score from the library. Instrumental parts are not always beautifully clearly marked, particularly in terms of cues. Sometimes the wrong cue is there, or an instrument that you will struggle to hear, and you need to actually mark that it's something much clearer, like a trumpet or a bass drum. So marking your own cues in the part from the score can be extremely helpful, and then using this kind of system of notation, lines down to mark the beats, to clarify rhythmic structures, will aid you immensely when tackling this kind of repertoire.